But let's get to Ross Dellinger, who will join us as a guest at 5:25. And I really didn't think he'd have time for us because of today. He released this article. Last month, the biggest money fight in college sports history unfolded. Negotiations were heated and will leave a permanent scar. But could this have been avoided? How a failed deal, the Pac-12's collapse, the SEC and Big Ten's threats changed the industry forever. Would the SEC and Big Ten have left the college football playoff and abandoned the other leagues if revenue negotiations weren't to their liking? Remember, we asked Brett Yarmark up in Frisco, could you not have maybe held out a little bit more? Both commissioners, Sankey and Petiti, told Yahoo Sports they planned other options. Absolutely, we would have left.
Yeah, and this should just be another reason why the sham that was the alliance will be forever reviled. This could have happened already. We could have already been in a 12-team playoff. Everybody could have been better off, and the Pac-12 might still exist. But because they capitulated to the Big Ten and bought into Kevin Warren's bogus attempt or bogus lie that he was there, making sure we get this right for everybody, when he was just really trying to take teams out of the Pac-12 in the first place while all this was going on, that decision forever changed college football. And the Big 12 at the time and the SEC were on the same page. They were there together. Bob Bowlesby and Greg Sankey were in agreement on what this was, Notre Dame was, and then you had that alliance in there that threw a wrench in the machine and then started us down this path of all right, you guys don't want to make a deal, then it's every man for himself, and you're not going to like where we wind up on the back end of this.
Yeah, somehow the Pac-12 managed to make the wrong decision at every single turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, if you think going all the way back to COVID, now you can argue over whether they were right in playing right away or holding out or whatever, but that led into the alliance. Mm-hmm. And basically since the alliance formed, it's been nothing but just swing and a miss, swing and a miss, swing and a miss to the point where there's only 2 schools remaining and it's a shell of itself. But I don't get taken aback at all by the fact that the SEC and the Big Ten could and have been planning other options for themselves. I think it's pretty clear that the situation that we're in right now, the structure that everybody's under, is not sustainable, that it's on very wobbly foundation, and that it basically points to, again, in this article, amongst various other articles that are out there, of the change that's coming. Everybody thinks of it's the playoff structure, or it's the conferences that everybody's in, or it's the levels that people are on. But the biggest change that's upcoming that's going to affect all of that is who all's in control and how are they in control and what does that look like. And I think that the answer is it won't be what we've known it as it always has been, which is the NCAA having basically all power outside of the courtrooms, of which we know that they are absolutely powerless. And that is why we are where we are, because of all these various lawsuits and people challenging them, and the NCAA taking L after L, and to the point now where it tried to hold back NIL that's thriving, and it should be legally. You've tried to hold back a lot of things, but the dam's bursting, and there's just change on the horizon. How big and catastrophic that wave is for the entire landscape remains to be seen, but it's coming, no doubt about it, and they've had plenty of warning. I mean, it's been out there on the horizon just growing and growing and growing for years now, so when it comes crashing down, nobody can say, we didn't see this coming.
No, you
had plenty of warning to get inland and get as high as you could, and they slow-played it. So I think this just reinforces that we're going to see a new version of college football. It may not be the Super 2 the way you think of it, of the NFL light. It might be. One thing we all can bank on, though, is it's going to be different leadership and different rules in place than what we're watching now.
Well, here's a part of the article from Ross. There was this meeting January, the morning that Georgia beat Alabama to win the national title. It appeared as if they were on the road to get this college football playoff, the format, and more done. And then the alliance, the Big Ten, ACC, and the Pac-12, pushed back against the proposal. At some point, as discussions grew heated, then Big 12 Commissioner Bob Bowlesby, frustrated and exhausted of the indecision, slowly packed his bag and began to rise from the table. The meeting isn't over, someone told him. It is for me, he shot back. What happened that day still lingers across college athletics. That's kind of a dark moment.
also kind of dramatic.
And
but,
well, that's exactly how I read it. That's exactly how it was written,
but
as you know. Yeah.
it's intended to be that way because that was the big action that Bowlesby took, and then you can argue, or he argues at least, that that's like the moments that all created now the stinginess, if you will, or the lack of a balance. You can roll back and attribute somewhat to that time period and them not getting things done. And that's not all on Bowlesby, obviously. That's more to point to, I just think, how contentious and all over the place the arguments were. And he got to the point where he's just like, we all reached that point of like, enough already. We're not going to come to an agreement. Enough already. But not coming to an agreement back then leads us to where we are now. And a lot has happened in those couple of years to the point now where there's no balance that's going to be found that was anywhere close to the balance that could have been found back then.
I still wonder what in the minds of George Kliavkoff and Jim Phillips, what kind of deal were they going to get, like holding off doing what they were doing? Like what exactly did Kevin Warren tell them? And of course, this whole lie about, oh, it's a scheduling partnership too. You're going to see Clemson and Oregon, and you're going to, it's going to be great. Like those things I would also bring up in the lawsuit eventually if I'm Florida State and Clemson in the ACC was like, hey, we got less money in this deal because our commissioner got snookered by a guy who's not even there anymore.
Yeah,
so
Warren's gone. Bowlesby's gone. Obviously,
that's also a
Kliavkoff.
big part of the article is
Yeah.
some of the, I guess, weeding through all of these
Power
various
brokers,
issues
yeah.
is the fact that it's, when you have like a power vacuum, how dangerous can that be, right? It can be even more dangerous than the people that are already in place because all of a sudden you got all these different voices. Now, it's not dangerous as in like a country lost a leader and now there's a civil war to replace the guy or anything, but there is suddenly a vacuum of leadership when you mention all those names that were involved at that point that are no longer involved. And so there's a lot of politicking and jostling going on, I would imagine, that just further complicates things. As opposed to if you had right now those same people in a room, don't you think that they'd probably get along a little bit better 2 years into this thing and could navigate this a much better way? But instead, you have new commissioners, and then they're it's not what it was 2 years ago, really, in many ways. So, that flew the coop, that opportunity. You can point fingers if you like to, but the point is that whatever they were talking about then is not relevant as much to now. It's the reason why they're talking about things the way that they're talking about them.
What led to now.
But that's what led to now and not what's going to necessarily be what we talk about in the future.
Sankey quoted in this article about why did he become so hardline. He goes, when we ended that meeting in 2022, without a decision, I was clear. If you are going to walk away from this opportunity, we are going to reevaluate our position on format, revenue sharing, and governance. People called me and said, why did you take such a hard line? Why did you put us in this position? Sankey, you guys walked away from the deal, which led to, all right, we're going to take as much of what we can get as possible. There's much more to get to with this, and we will at around 5:30.
And I'm going to comment on that particular line because I know we got to get to the first break before we get to the rest of the show. But when people say, I believe that Greg Sankey has the greater interest of college athletics at heart, I believe he did right there. At least at that time, that's when he still could make room in his heart to say, this is the best thing going forward. But then when he saw how everyone else reacted, he's like, all right, you guys triple dog dared me. Here we go.
It was his villain turn.
Yeah.
It's basically the moment that he crossed over and became the villain, so to speak. I know his fan bases don't feel that way, and I don't mean it the way that it sounds, but that's basically what happened. It's like, you double dog dared me. You didn't think I had the guts to do it. All right, here we are, and guess who's got the power, and guess who's going to navigate this thing?
Yep.
Me and my Big Ten buddy, and you guys aren't going to have much control over what happens next. And so, that's basically what happened is, like I said, flew the coop, that opportunity that they had, the schools and themselves discussing this a couple years ago. They had a better offer on the table, I think, for everybody. And now you basically got Craig Sankey going, all right, we're just going to take it all and do what we will. And now you've got the disparity that you have, which is still going to be the big issue, I think, moving forward and kind of figuring out how all of this looks and how it operates and how competitive it all really is. I hear plenty of, well, it's always been imbalanced, and yes, to some extent that's true, but never like this. Never like what it's about to be. Never even close to anything like this, the disparity in payments between a large gulf of schools. So yeah, I mean, maybe people should have listened, but it's too late to do that now. And so how far do the Big Ten and the SEC take this, and what does that turn into ultimately, I think, is what we're all wondering now.
I was at the Baylor spring practice on Saturdays talking to somebody in the administration. This story that Craig and I discussed on Friday about the $1 billion lawsuit against the NCAA and its member schools, that includes everybody that's a part of FBS. And that is about a $14 million hit for everybody, 70 or so programs who would take the hit. What it was, the Autonomy 5, which is now the 4 major conferences, and also the 2 that are a part of the Pac-12. And he's like, there are some schools that can write that check, but most of them can't even fathom that, even with the money that's generated today in college athletics.
Well, that's the big, I guess, hindrance to moving all the way forward
Jeffrey
right now.
Kessler's on
is trying to figure out what all that's going to look like. Like, how much do schools owe? And certainly that's something that I think a lot of them are preparing for. But, yeah, when you're making $60 million more than a school in another conference, it's going to be easier for Oklahoma to pay that than for Florida State. Hence why Florida State's trying to pivot and get out of that for many reasons when it comes to money. But that lawsuit, amongst other lawsuits, are a big part of that money accumulation that you're worried about. And how much are we paying out in just lawsuits? Because, yeah, Texas won't blink. They'll be fine. Some oil guy will cut a check the next week that replaces the money lost if they even notice it's gone or gone to begin with. But there's going to be others that, yeah, it's going to be real difficult. There was the quote in the article itself. Our buddy Bob Thompson, also Bob Bowlesby, I think you say friend of the show as well. I mentioned Bowlesby getting up in those early discussions and just walking out that one day. But as they both put it, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And so, yeah, with this lawsuit, everybody's going to take a ding, but it's going to be the schools that aren't making $60 million more than the others through their TV deal that are really going to feel it. And even those who have money will feel it to some extent. So, yeah, I think everybody's kind of preparing for that and how they figure out all of these lawsuits. And when the dust settles, what does that even begin to look like, and where are we all sitting at that point?
We, by the way, UT Parking asking about whether Congress will get involved. They have their own problems. They need to figure out how to handle our country, how to work our country, how to run it, and help us. And college athletics just doesn't really need to be on their radar, and it's more for what they're trying to do for their constituents as far as how they look rather than getting something done.
I also think, though, and mark today down, April 22nd at 3:39 p.m., Congress has been telling them, although Congress isn't good at saying things straight, if you guys come up with something that we can, if you come up with the idea and tell us this is going to work and it's agreed on and we're not going to have to keep coming back to this, then we will help you pass safeguards to protect it, and we will work with you on that. But what you're doing right now is counterproductive because you're coming to Congress going, tell us what to do. And they're like, we don't have to do anything. We don't know how to do anything.
Yeah, we don't know how to do what we're doing. And it's amazing that we're sitting here. How are we going to help you guys? That's basically what it is. But, the courts are also not going to solve the whole payout thing. Like that lawsuit of the back pay to former athletes and the various other ones that are in play right now, there's no magic wand that Congress can go oh, you don't have to pay anything. That goes away.
They're going to pay or they're going to settle and still pay something.
To your point, there are areas like NIL legislation where you could theoretically have a chance for somebody to come in politically and help you out there. But as we've seen with that, it's very slow moving. And if it's even making progress, it's hard to notice at times. But yeah, with the lawsuits, that's just something you're going to have to chin up and just take it and see, what's left over in your pocket afterwards. And that's why schools, as you probably were indicating, schools are preparing their pocketbooks right now. Those that you talk to for what that payout's going to have to look like. Is that fair to say?
Yep. It could give or take whatever, but it's going to cost everybody a chunk.
Yeah.
A chunk of somewhere between what could be 12 and 16 million. And all just depends on how deep and how many schools are a part of paying that chunk.
Yeah, there's another part of the article, Brett Yormark, he said, I can't sit here and say I'm thrilled with the revenue model, but it's the best deal we could get. I'm bullish on the Big 12, which he's said a lot of times, and I'm betting on the future, which he said to us. With the investment we are making in football, we will be in a better position when that look-in presents itself, and that look-in, part of what he helped negotiate, where they will have an opportunity to look in at the contract, depending on realignment, further realignment in 2027. They can reevaluate things then. That's something that he pushed for, but that's about all he got. I think it sounds like from.
And he mentioned that to us in Frisco. Also, on the group of fives, based on if they could have decided back in January of 2022, we talk about the ones at the higher level schools in the FBS. A former president at Troy, Jack Hawkins, said that if they would have agreed back then, each group of five school would have received $3.3 million each. They ended up getting $1.8 million each. And when you're getting 3.3 rather than 1.8, basically almost twice as much, and that is also something that fell out the window of a car and you never got it back.
Yeah, they just and Ross does such a great job at highlighting these things, but it's just it makes you like we've talked about Congress and the NCAA. Like, where are there people running things right now in the world where you're like, man, they're killing it? It's just it's seemingly all bad news all the time.
Yeah, like I don't even know. I can't even say a country and know for sure whether it's like Canada. Nope, they're not happy. Mexico, I don't think they're happy. I don't really know though, but pretty much everywhere in Europe, nope. So on and so forth. It's a long article. Like, there's a lot to
12
unpack
pages
from.
when I printed it.
There's a lot to unpack to it. I mean, there's a great quote from the North Texas AD about, the lawsuits that we're talking about.
Yeah,
it's kind
Jared
of presented.
Mosley used to work in Waco.
It's kind of presented, that part of this big payout that everybody's going to have to pay and everybody's worried about is ultimately the SEC and the Big Ten, since they're the biggest and the best and they've got the most money, they're going to pay for the majority of it. And that's kind of what people expect. But as Jared Mosley points out, and that's what they're worried about too. Like, I feel like that's kind of a thing that has to get done, and then we'll really see what's going to happen next, because until that gets situated, there's that hang up that everybody's still involved together, right? And then once you get over that and you kind of have new laws established potentially, or you at least have some of these lawsuit payouts done with, then you can really start to pivot and do what you kind of want to do. But this is kind of everybody's on board in the same boat together with this potential payout to former athletes, for example. But yeah, on the other side of that, as he points out, it's like, that's great that, the Big Ten and the SEC are probably going to have to pay a big majority of the money forward, but like the money they get is still like, way more than we get in the long run. And so where are we in the grand scheme of things? I know people aren't really pressed or worried about North Texas, but there are those schools out there that, you think about just the power schools, so to speak, that are in flux right now. I mean, imagine those schools. I mean, imagine they're holding on to the end of the cape and just hanging on for a ride and not sure where it's going to take them. So yeah, there's a lot of nervousness, and there should be when you've got all of these court battles going on, but it does feel like this storm's just continuing to brew, and we are going to get on the other side of it at some point. And we've had all the warning signs, and what that looks like will be very, very interesting.
All right, here's the best quote to close it out. And this is from the Miami AD, Dan Radakovich. But we, and this is what the Big 12 needs to do, but we, the ACC, have to play better and get more teams in the college football playoff so that in the next 6-year cycle, when it's reevaluated, we'll get more revenue. It's easier said than done. ACC's got a couple of alphas and a couple of others just underneath of that. The Big 12 needs to have somebody rise to the top, and not just one or two schools, but they got to start winning some of these head-to-head battles and then get to the playoff and win more. All right, go ahead.
I like this one from Jeremiah Donati. We shouldn't be surprised that the conferences and schools are going into this acting solely in the best interest of their conference and respective institutions. We've demonstrated for years that this is our model. We don't make decisions in the interest of the greater good. And I think that nails it. So you can't get mad at Sankey or Petiti when they're doing what's best for them, because that's what everybody's done throughout college athletics. But to your point, that's what I've said all along. What's the cure-all? What can you do? What's the guaranteed thing you can do that can help things? You win. That's all you can really do. And it's going to be harder when you've got $60 million less to budget for your roster every year. But that's all you can do is just go out and try to win.